You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and sidemount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet.
Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is brought to you by our brilliant sponsor X-Deep and by the patrons of Speaking Sidemount. Huge thanks to both for their support that makes everything you're about to listen to possible. Now, if you'd like to become a patron of Speaking Sidemount and support the show, look out for the links in the podcast notes. Now, one of the pinnacles in the application of sidemount diving is, of course, cave diving and cave exploration. It's an addictive pastime to research and then ultimately physically search for and then investigate flooded holes in the ground in an attempt to find that euphoric, never-seen-before virgin cave passage. Many cave explorers either started their journeys as sidemount and cave instructors or found their way to this profession as a way to pay for their passion. For the vast majority, it's a match made in heaven, where they get to earn a living sharing and teaching about how to dive caves and then applying their skills to their own exploration. Teaching's also the perfect way to keep their own cave diving skills current and built into muscle memory. Now, the path to becoming a cave instructor is long. To even begin, you need to be a capable sidemount diver. Yes, you can do it in backmount, but really, why? Sorry, I digress. Then there's joining courses with other instructors, observing their teaching styles and content, having your own skills reviewed and critiqued, and when you're ready, assisting on courses, being evaluated, then eventually qualifying as a cabin instructor. Teaching, building experience, and then repeating this process twice more to reach the coveted level of full cave instructor. Now, I'm using the TDI agency levels here, but they map really easily to the levels at other agencies. Long story short, it's a journey full of pressure, failures, learning, and ultimately, I'm sure, one of satisfaction when achieving a pinnacle level in the dive profession. In this episode, Tamara Adame joins me to share her journey along this path to cave instructor under the mentorship of Patrick Woodman of ProTech Playa. I had the good fortune to meet and hang with Tamara a bit while I was at ProTech training with Patrick. She's an amazing person, a great diver, and has a real passion for caves and for cave diving. Tamara talks about growing up around the ocean in Mexico and how this shaped her love for everything aquatic. She shares on her time in Belgium building her career before she found herself back in Mexico and ultimately fell in love with caves and cave diving. She shares on how she met Patrick and how he guided her on her path to becoming a cave instructor. And Tamara goes into how she came to work at ProTech and the standards-driven focus that the team have there. We discuss the challenges and failures and ultimately achieving the standards required in cave instructor training. And we go on to talk about where Tamara is taking her own diving, including scientific diving work and the search for Tamara's cave. All this and much, much more in this episode of Speaking Sidemount.
Hola, Tamara. Welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Hello, Steve. Thank you for inviting me and having me. And I think that this was a little bit overdue, but I'm happy we're finally here.
Exactly. We've been talking for a wee while, and you and I met just over a year ago when I was at ProTech last November doing some training with Patrick and then diving with Steve Crosby, which was just brilliant. I loved my time there, and I reminisce many times about it. So let's start talking about you, though, because you're the subject of this episode, and I really want to understand a little bit more about you. So tell us a bit about how you got into diving.
Well, I think my story is a little bit different than everybody else because I have been diving most of my life. And I grew up next to the ocean in a very small beach town. And my dad is a fisherman, and we had boats growing up, and we're just like ocean people. So for me, the ocean and the water and the cenotes and everything water related was always something part of my life. I never knew that this was something special. And there's many times in my life where I have had like a reality check, and it's like, well, people don't do this. this is something I did, or I had the chance and the fortune of doing because I grew up in this very specific place. So basically, when I was 12 years old, my mom said, I've signed you up for scuba diving lessons with your godfather, and you have to go to the beach tomorrow morning and go to the dive shack. And I was like, okay, I'll go if you are sending me. And for me, it was really not a big deal. I was not impressed with what I saw. I was not challenged with being underwater because I was already free diving before I could learn to walk. I was already, in salt water. So for me, it was just another way of being in the water. And it was like this for a very long time. And I think it's not a sad story. It's just, I thought this was everybody's life. Like I had never been somewhere else, And much later in life, I went to live in Belgium. I think I was about 26 years old when a friend from work said, why don't we go on a diving trip? And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, let's go to Egypt. And I'm like, why would we go to Egypt? And he's like, because that's the most beautiful reefs that you can see. And I was like, no, the most beautiful reefs I can see are at home, right? And he's like, no, it's Egypt. And I was like, fine. I was only open water certified. So we went to Egypt and it just blew my mind. I could not believe that the fish were not the same that I had always seen. And it's the first time that I actually just got an interest in the underwater world as such. So it came later to me, and it definitely grew very slowly on me. But after that trip, I started getting trained and did my advanced. And I was living abroad, so I was coming to Mexico and I was going to Akumal to my dad's friend's dive shop to do, the next level and the next level. And then one day I finished rescue course, and my instructor, Alessandro from Akumal Dive Center, he handed me a Dive Master book. And he said, well, you have to read this book and then you can come back next year. And I was like, what is this? And I started reading like Dive Master. And then I just got the bug and I thought like, maybe I can do this, It was really very casual. It was never like, I love those stories where people, it's like the first time I put my head in the water, I could not go back and I sold all my things and just moved. And I'm like, that's awesome. But it took me like 30 years to get that feeling. So that was my story.
It's amazing for people who grow up in those sort of areas. I have a not dissimilar story in that my father loved the beach. And so we lived in the southern part of Auckland, which is not near the water particularly, although in New Zealand, you're never very far from the water, no matter where you are. But we would go to the beach every weekend. So I grew up from a toddler, always in the ocean, and started in Jacques Cousteau, was on TV at the time. So I was watching Albert Falco and Bernard Delamont and Cousteau, and I just thought, I want to do that. So I begged them to give me a snorkeling kit. And so from about 3 or 4 years old, I was snorkeling. And I could actually swim with what I call flippers then, with fins on, before I could swim for real. And so I was doing that every weekend. And so same thing when I came 18 years old. Well, actually, my first dive experience was, I think, 14, but with my stepfather. But I did my open water course as a 19-year-old, and it was no big deal. I think the only thing that surprised me, going back to the 14-year-old experience, was I put my head under and I thought, this is just normal. And then I thought, well, if I go a bit deeper than snorkel depth, can I still breathe? And so I remember just taking those few tentative breaths going, is this going to be okay? And then realizing it was, and then thinking, okay, this is cool. But like you, I took it in my stride, and I did love it from the very beginning. But for a long time, I think 25 years, I was just an open water diver who was hunting crayfish and so on. And then it was only when I lost my dive card and needed the new dive card that I thought, I may as well do advanced, so they don't hassle me about how deep. Yeah, how deep I'm going to dive and so on. So it is quite, everyone's experience is a little bit different. I do find one thing that I think I struggled with when I went to instructor because of that was, how some people struggle with the initial steps of getting into diving, where putting their head in the water and clearing masks and that sort of thing. That was never any big deal for that. People like you and I who live that way, and I guess some empathy for others is helpful too.
Yeah, it was very... how to say, It is when I became a diving instructor that I realized that most people have never been in this environment. Like on the planet, most people are never in touch with the water since a young age. And my mom is really not aquatic, but I never gave it any thought. I never wondered why she never comes, diving, or like I just knew she didn't like the water, but now I understand that she's from the desert. So very different environment. And I'm like my father. So yeah. And since birth, they have put me in the water. So I never knew not being in the ocean. And when I did my instructor course and we talk about demonstrating skills, it took me a while to understand why they want me to demonstrate to empty a mask. And and they said, well, you're going to have to teach people how to do that. And I was like, what do you mean? Everybody knows how to empty a mask. And they're like, no, you have to teach them to like breathe out through their nose. And I'm like, well, how else would you empty it? Like I had those moments where I was like, okay, I have to think like someone who's never put their face in the water. And I have had friends who come and visit at home and they just go swimming and they tell me like, there's fish. And I'm like, of course there's fish. But yeah, there was a lot of learning for me becoming an instructor about lifestyle and just in general, how lucky I was to experience that all my life. And I think I managed to turn the story around and then really be an ocean lover and outspoken about it, because all of this was just, taken for granted before.
Yeah, 100%. And so how did that then lead? You became an instructor. How did that lead to Sidemount and cave diving?
Well, I became an instructor in 2014, and I had a job in Brussels that I really liked, and I had a really nice life there. It was my childhood dream because I grew up in a fisherman village, barefoot, and, I was almost island kind of life. And when I was 5 years old, I told my mom, you know what, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to leave, and I'm going to go and live in another country where they don't speak our language. I knew when I was very little that I wanted to go away. So when the first opportunity came, I left. I went to live in Europe and I fulfilled that dream of being like a businesswoman and to wear a suit and high heels and to speak French and German and Dutch and English and to work in an office. This was my dream. The one thing that made me come back is just missing nature so much. And I lived in the city. I didn't know that there was a lot of really good technical diving in Belgium at the time. And I just missed nature. I felt like I wasn't in touch with the elements enough, except for the rain. I just had this, I woke up one day and I thought, I have to leave or I will never leave. And then I quit my job and I came to Mexico to do my instructor training. So I became a diving instructor. And everybody told me, you cannot be a diving instructor here unless you're a full cave diver. And I was like, why? Well, because you're not going to have enough work. And I was like, well, I'm not interested in cave diving. And I am going to be an instructor and I'm just going to do it my way. So I started working as an instructor. And then I was joining sometimes the cenote tours. So with friends or, with clients or whatever. And I was always like, it's nice, but it's the same. I've seen the cenotes. I'm not like super impressed. Until one day I saw a side tunnel and that just caught my attention. And I thought I can totally fit through there. And it just looks dark. And I wanted to look in the hole. And when I came out of the water, I said, like, there's other places there where you could go. And they said, yeah, there's caves, but you can't go there. And that was the catch. It's like, what do you mean I can't? Well, you need to be trained for it. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I did it mostly for myself. For a couple of years, I didn't really work in cave diving. And I just did it occasionally. I really enjoyed it, but it was more because of the challenge and the opportunity to go in places with the freedom of not being guarded by an instructor or by a guide. And I actually did my training in back mount. and I did Intro to Cave. And then the following year, I trained in decompression diving because I was preparing for an expedition to Bikini Atoll. 1 year went by, and after that 1 year in the expedition, then my course director trained me in Sidemount, and I had finished full cave then. So it took me about a year to complete all of the technical training that I was kind of set on at the time. It was really exciting. It was really different, and it was extremely challenging. So that is what ultimately, I think, has kept me in technical diving, is that I did not find it easy. I was terrible at it. I'm not a talented diver. And for the first time, I wanted something that I could not accomplish easily. So I became obsessed with it. And I felt very, very hooked. Like just, I was very captivated by the beauty and the feeling of being very far or very deep, not in the depth sense, but deep inside of the ground. I just felt like I belong here. And it's a beautiful thing to go somewhere you've never seen before and to feel that you belong there. So I think that is something that I continue experiencing on a daily basis. And and after that, I was also, it's not super easy when you're a new cave diver, because you have the training, maybe you have the tools, but you don't have the logistics. Like you always have to be looking for the information and the address and the navigation and this and that. So at the time, it's not that long ago, but at the time we didn't have Instagram as we have today. You know, there weren't as many forums, so people weren't really asking for directions on Facebook. And it was a lot more old school. Like you actually had to go and dive the places and then find some of the places yourself, or have a group of people that you kind of earn it from, which I feel a little bit, it's been lost a tiny bit. Nowadays, you can just make a post like, oh, I want to go to the Blue Abyss, and there's someone who's going to send you the address, and they don't even know you. At the time, back in my day, you had to actually work for it. Yeah.
It's probably helped you build relationships with people within the cave diving community that you might not have had otherwise. It's a little bit like being forced to get into a conversation with someone at an event. It used to happen to me sometimes. You know, it's really a great skill to have. And also those relationships, you can build them over time and eventually perhaps even go diving with these people. And it's such a cool thing.
Yes. And I remember people telling me, if you can't find a place, it means you're not supposed to be there. And that stuck with me, because when you start diving, your eyes are not used to what you're looking at. And then you develop this language. And one of my mentors said, the cave speaks a language, and you have to learn that language in order to understand the cave. It really felt like that. A couple times I tried to do a certain dive and I couldn't find the spot. And then with more experience, I went back and I thought, this is so silly. Like I have been here and I have swum by many times and I could not find it, you know? I think it's something, it's like the cave sometimes reveals itself to you, and it's very beautiful to have this kind of sixth sense.
Yep. You just said something that's really interesting there. The cave reveals itself to you when you are ready for the information.
Yeah, exactly. Patrick always says, don't look for lines, look for cave. And that's something that we also teach or try to transfer in the knowledge to our students, because a lot of people tell you, like, you're going on this line and then you're looking for this line and where is the line? But you look at the cave and you read where is the actual hole where you fit, right? Because sometimes if there's a wall, it's clearly not that way. So in that sense, yeah, there was a lot of learning, and the community has changed a lot. Training has changed a lot. The environment has changed a lot. So we have to evolve with it. But it's kind of cool to have done that in the times where not everything was on Instagram, if I can say that. And as I said, it wasn't that long ago. From an old timer. But things go very fast.
Indeed, they do, especially these days. Now, you mentioned Patrick, and I've effused many times about ProTech since I came and dived with you guys last year, and I'm a little bit in awe about what Kim and Patrick have developed there, the culture of excellence, the level you guys dive at, the lengths you go to keep improving your own diving, let alone pass it on to others. So tell us a bit about how you came to work there and your experience as a member of the ProTech team.
Well, I trained with Patrick in 2021. I came to do my CCR course, and it was very spontaneous. I went to see Patrick originally because I wanted to make the most of the time that we were kind of granted due to the global pandemic. So we were at a halt. We didn't have a lot of work, and I had a business before, but with mostly my clients being Europeans, they weren't really traveling that much. So I had a lot of time, and I told myself, I'm never going to have this time again where I don't have to go to work. And there's nothing I can do. I'm going to set my mind to do something that is going to last and give me benefits that I'm maybe going to harvest in a long time. That was my idea. I have to do something that is going to be permanent, not just like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym and get fit. No, I wanted something that was going to stay in my life. And I thought maybe I could become a cave instructor. It's the first time when I had the thought. And it's funny because I did contact some instructors, and it just didn't work out. Like, some instructors said, like, yeah, I'll give you a call, and then they never called, or I'll send you the information, and then they didn't send it, or didn't see your message. So the time went by, and someone said, you should call Patrick. And I thought, well, I don't really know him, and everything I've heard about him is bad. No.
It does make me laugh. Yeah.
No, but of course, I mean, people have an opinion of everybody, right? And so I didn't think it was a match. Like, I just didn't think he was not my first choice, but it was obviously for a reason, because I sent him a message and he said, I will call you in 5 minutes. And he called me. And now I know that having a call with Patrick, like, within the minute is very difficult. He's very busy, and a lot of the times he's in a different time zone and everything. So we had a call, and he said, look, I don't take outsiders, but maybe I can take you, and this is how it works. You can assist and should assist all of the courses that you can get on, and then we're going to spend some time together, and after a while, when you think you're ready, you will book an appointment for instructor training, and then we see where you are, and then we do an evaluation, and it's not going to take a short time. No, and he said, you're looking at 4 years. So I thought, well, 4 years is a long time, but time is going fast. So I'm, if I don't start today, then what am I doing? So I said, all right, so we can maybe do it. You will not believe this, but a toucan just sat on my window. I'm so sorry.
I heard it land.
I'm sorry that I'm doing this. I get distracted with wildlife.
What do you want to do with it?
Well, I guess it's just going to be looking at me for a while. Yeah. I can't do anything. Oh, man, this is a little weird. Sorry. I always get distracted with the wildlife. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
So anyway, so then what happens is he said, come and see me at my house. Like, I don't know. He said, like, come by tomorrow and we'll talk. So I went there and we just sat, and he said, okay, what do you want to do? What do you have in mind? And I said, well, I just want to be a really good instructor. I want to be someone who knows things about equipment that I had never even thought about. This is what had impressed me when I met people who were instructors at ProTech. And I said, I want to be that person that knows how a bolt snap is clipped onto a D-ring. Like, I want to know everything about everything. And he said, well, it's going to take a lot of work. You're just going to have to, like, commit to it. There's not a lot of other things you can do at the same time when you're trying to be an instructor trained by us. And I said, okay, fine. I have nothing else to do. I'm going to do this. And I said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about something else. And he said, what is that? And I said, you think that one day I can be in rebreather training? And he said, yeah, what about Wednesday? And I was like, Wednesday? And he's like, yeah, Wednesday, like we can start Wednesday. I'm like, after tomorrow? And he's like, yeah, I'll see you at the shop at 9. And I was like, okay. I was completely unprepared. I was like, this was like my first question about rebreather. I did not know what a rebreather was except from having seen the guys on them, but I had no knowledge about rebreathers. And so I showed up at the shop and I started the training. And then on the second day, I was like, what am I doing here? Like, this is too much for me. I don't understand a lot of it. And I think that I have to quit. And this was my thought. Like, I have to tell him that I'm just not intelligent enough. That's what I thought. And the third day, everything just clicked. And I felt like I have to do this for the rest of my life. And it was very difficult because I, at the time, had not even paid for the training. I did not have a rebreather. I did not have access to a rebreather. Like, I was really not set up for success, except having all the will to do it. And to give you an idea how little I knew about rebreathers, I thought the counterlung was the BCD. Like, I thought the rebreathers had a counterlung, like, because you need like the buoyancy. And they said you exhale into the counterlung. And I was like, what? Like, I really did not know what I was getting myself into. And then it just happened. He taught me and I loved it. And I thought he was not only one of the most knowledgeable people that I had met, but he was interesting and funny and high energy, which sometimes is very challenging for me because I'm very introspective and very, maybe not quiet, but, you know, I'm more reserved and I like to be alone. I really love to be alone and to not talk to anyone. So when I was in the class, I was getting like super hyped and had a little bit of trouble dealing with the energy. But then I just found like a true mentor, which I don't think I have had someone like that in my life before for this amount of time, you know, like there's people who have supported me and helped me and everything. But I think it's the first time that I can say that someone has mentored me. So at the end of the training, he sat me down and he offered me a job. And I thought, well, if it goes wrong, I'll just go back to doing what I was doing before. I don't have to sign it in stone. And I don't have a job currently. And yeah, let's do it. Yeah. He said, you're going to be here all the time. If you really want to be an instructor, you're going to be in the shop most days. So why don't you are at the shop most days, but you work for us? And I was like, okay, let's do it. And that was in 2021 in May. So here I am. It's almost 3 years later. It's kind of difficult to measure when you are offered this opportunity. It's kind of difficult to measure the potential and, you know, the future. And I have said this before. I don't think that I knew what ProTech was when I accepted this job. So I didn't have like a fascination for ProTech itself because I didn't know how big ProTech was. And I didn't know how deep the knowledge was and how far back the history and the experience and all of this. I knew ProTech was really good and very cool, but I was not really knowledgeable in the extent of it. So when I joined ProTech, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And in a way, I appreciate that it is like that because I absolutely want to be here and I absolutely love my job and what I have become and what I can become. But I never idealized it, if you know what I mean. I never had this dream like, I hope one day they take me. I never felt like that before. And now I just feel extremely fortunate and grateful that I was given this opportunity that I could take that has been very humbling and very growth-inducing, both technically and in my skills and my abilities. But I think the human part has been what really has changed my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. A great story. And yeah, I understand what you're saying where you didn't understand what you were getting into. And then now, 3 years later, the depth of knowledge and experience and skills that you've acquired through that must be immense. Tell us a bit about the biggest changes that have happened through that period in terms of what you've learned by being part of the ProTech team.
Well, I think that I have never in my life only done one thing exclusively and only. And experiencing this in an organic way, like nobody made me do it. I just slowly became, like I said, maybe obsessed, but let's say 100% devoted to what I do. And I had always heard or read, when you want to be really good at something, you have to dedicate, is it 10,000 hours, or I don't know what is the, the standard. To be an expert in something, you have to do it all the time. Like you have to breathe it and drink it and eat it and sleep it. And I don't think that it was a conscious effort. It happened. And I gave myself to it. And now it is also complicated, let's say socially, to explain that to people or to share with outsiders what my life is like, because I don't do anything else. And it's not because I can't, it's because every time I wake up, I am thinking of this, or I am going to the shop, or I am planning to do something that is related to my career. And people say, but it just means you're a workaholic. But it's way more than that, because it's not my work. It's just my lifestyle, and my entire routine goes around it. So when I understood that every day that I don't spend doing this is one day that I will be less good at it, then my life changed, because this is the purpose. This is my purpose. And I'm not it's not negotiable. Yeah. And it's a very peaceful feeling. It's like, it's not negotiable. I'm going to do this every single day, and I'm going to do this on my days off, and I'm going to do this after work. I'm going to continue looking at what I have to do for Cave, for technical, for CCR. Like it is just a 24/7 thing, and it's life-changing. It has been life-changing, because I never had this before in my life, where I was 100% dedicated to something. My heart, my brain, all of my funds and all of my energy is just put into that. So it's very fulfilling when you get the blessing of being able to do what you want to do as much as I can do it. And I think that the team shares that. And that is what makes us ProTech people, is that you will hardly ever see someone doing like, oh yeah, on the weekends I do this other activity. It's like we have side activities, but it's all revolving around it. Or, people work out, but because we just want to be stronger for the diving, or that sort of thing. Yeah. I have tried to have holidays outside of diving. I have tried to have trips that are not really, I have tried to make sure that I don't get obsessed with this. But at this point, I'm like, I'm going to stop trying, because this is really not, there's nothing I want to fight anymore. Like, it's just going to be this. Yeah. It took me a while. Until last year, I think I was still like, oh, maybe I have to take a hiking holiday or whatever. And now I'm like, every single second and every single penny that falls in my pocket is just dedicated to this. So yeah, it's very different to any other job, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And you say the word job, and what was coming to mind to me, I own a coffee shop, and we're just coming at the end of our summer season. That's why I'm looking pretty tired at the moment. Been working nonstop since Christmas Day, would you believe? Look, we see people on holiday, and, when we see them leave at the end of their time, having come to us each day, you can see the look in their eyes when they have this feeling, I have to go back because I have to go back to work. And what you were talking about is this unique and quite rare thing where your work aligns completely with your passion and becomes your purpose.
Yes.
And so few people have that. And we talk about it a lot. We talk about, hey, follow your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. And it kind of is that feeling, isn't it? And it's so hard to achieve, and yet you're an example of someone who's done that, where you've aligned your work with your passion, and that has become your purpose. And You made another really interesting comment to me, which is you were fighting yourself for a while thinking that maybe this isn't right, but it actually is, isn't it? I think you discovered that you don't have to be doing something else because you're on the right path already. It's such a cool thing. And I'm so happy for you and for the other people there that you've found that.
Yeah. And this morning, actually, I was writing a comment on a forum where someone asked, what is it like to leave your job and go and do the diving, right? And I said, well, when I had a corporate job, I worked so that I could go and do some things that I liked for a couple weeks a year. And then I left that and I went to do something I love every single day. So my quality of life is very high because I'm always enjoying going to the cave or enjoying going to the water. And I don't remember that I have had a day where I did not like where I was. Yeah, I go home and I have had the most beautiful stimulation that I can have by seeing the cave and the jungle and the birds and all of this thing is all around me most of the day. And of course, there's other tasks that I have to do or take care of. But the main and central part of my life is around these gorgeous places that most people are trying to come and see 1 or 2 weeks a year, right? And I'm here all the time. So my head and my heart, when I go home, I don't have this kind of like a tickle, oh, I have to go out. I have to go and find something that is going to make me happy because I am looking at my happy every single day when I'm diving. So in that sense, if you manage to turn it around and do more of what you love, then the rest kind of falls into place, if you know what I mean. Like you're going to get the opportunities that you need to sustain it. And I always say it as well. I don't recommend it. My friend was laughing because he said, how can you not recommend your job to others because you love it so much? Why wouldn't you recommend it? I said, well, it's not a highly paid job. It's a tough job in a hostile place with an inherent level of risk. It's a job where I'm responsible for safety of myself and other people, where I am putting myself in positions and situations that are dangerous by nature. And it's a place full of mud, heavy things to lift, bugs, bad shit. And it's just generally not a pleasant thing to do unless you love it 100%. There is no way someone can do this unless they love it, because there's just no reward. Yeah, there's no, this is not a place where you come to make a business out of it. And it's like, well, I get by because, I make the money. No, like it is really annoying profession to do if you don't like it. Yeah, I just say like, I don't recommend it because most people would never be willing to put up with all the things that are uncomfortable in my profession and in this activity, right? Yeah. So it's a lot of sacrifice and it's a lot of discomfort, and the reward for me is worth it. So that's why I do it, because I can just go. Sometimes it's 20 minutes because that's the consumption of the student or whatever. And you went in a cave for 20 minutes and I go out and I'm like, look at the water, look at the sky, like look at the leaves, completely enamored of nature. And this is exactly why I left my office job.
You make a really good point, because just because this is great for you doesn't mean it's great for everybody. And the key is aligning your passion, and that may or may not be cave diving. One thing that comes to mind, a few things. So all the things you described are the reasons that I'm not a cave explorer. Apart from circumstances and where I live and everything else, I just cannot be asked walking through the jungle, hacking jungle, looking for a hole in the ground, jumping into a muddy pool that might go nowhere.
Yeah, the majority of the times you're not going to find something, because if it was that easy, everybody would do it, And I've done my share of jungle walking, and I'm yet to find the Tamara cave, It's really...
I'm sure that will come.
I've had some lucky days, but until I get to name a cave.
Let's move on a bit, because I do want to come to that. But we talking earlier before we got onto the passion part. Thank you, because I love that. But we were talking about your progress to cave instructing, and I am interested, don't know the answers to this either. I've seen your social media, but where are you now in your journey to cave instructing? Tell us a little bit about what's happened through the past 3 years, because you mentioned earlier this was going to take 4 years. And so I imagine you're towards the end of that process now.
I'm breaking records, but don't tell anybody. I'm just kidding. I'm an intro to cave instructor. So that's the first level of cave instructing. The hardest part, I want to say the hardest part is behind me, but the hardest part is to be able to do it properly once you are certified. So just going to elaborate a little bit, the hardest part of the training is behind me, because to start with, I was not trained at ProTech. So I did not have cave training from ProTech. So there was a very long and very humbling period of time when I had to relearn everything and understand everything to a degree of knowledge that I did not have before. This basically consisted in me assisting or attending more than assisting, because assisting is when you are actually part of the teaching process. So a lot of people say, can I come and assist your class? Well, no, because you don't know anything about teaching cave yet. So you can come and sit at my class, but that would be more, in my eyes, attending a class. So I attended a lot of classes and I took a lot of notes. I had to absorb everything I could from seeing other people teach and from seeing different students learn in different ways. And the first level that I applied for, let's say, was side mount and back mount, what we call in PSAI ABC, which is an equivalent to fundamentals or intro to tech, or basically where you learn to use 2 tanks, whatever the configuration is. So in that period of time, is also when I had to refine my skills, when I had to become stable and balanced. And, it's the period of time where all of my faults, let's say, all of my little hiccups and things were just everywhere. And it was very, very kind of soul crushing in a way, because you think you're a good diver. You think you are there and you're suddenly not there. Yeah. Or they ask you, please do this, and then you can't do it. And you just feel like you are maybe not where you should be, but that is part of the plan. We have to bring all of these imperfections out and reveal them and then work on them. And this can only happen when you practice a lot. So obviously back then, when I did my first evaluations, this was in December 2021, and I got a lot of feedback and I got a lot of comments and a lot of remarks and a lot of everything. And it is very, you need to be very solid to be able to receive so much feedback on yourself, because you're basically in front of a mirror that is just spitting, it's not bad, but it's oh yeah, and then you moved your foot like this and you shouldn't move your foot like that. And it's dude, my foot, my ankle, yes, your ankle is not like this, it's like this. And I'm just well, I didn't know that I came like this from factory, not side mount approved, So that process, it was difficult, but also for me became part of my obsession. I'm what do you mean I cannot do this? Of course I can do this. I just have to. And then I did have some parts where Patrick told me, you're not ready. You're not stable. I can see that you don't dive this configuration enough when I tried to do my back mount certification. And he's you can do the skills, but you don't look solid. And I was well, when Patrick tells you you don't look solid, it's kind of thank you, but I really wished that I was. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier Patrick's reputation a little bit and how some people perceive him negatively. And I think a lot of that comes from the brutal honesty that you get from him. In my mind, it comes from a really, really good place. It comes from his heart, because he genuinely wants you to be better. But my experience, much shorter than yours, on my 12 days or whatever it was of training that I did with him, I did 2 courses. It was exactly that experience. He breaks down your base skills And while you might think you're good, in a global standard, you might be quite good. If you look at side mount divers around the world, you probably say, hey, she's really, really good. But there's levels, and you're aspiring now to a different level. And look, I had a similar experience, especially on CCR Cave, but even on the other course, Mod 2 Sidewinder, was that Patrick would look at you in the water and would put you into situations where you had to demonstrate your stability in particular. And if your foot was in the wrong position, or if you moved your fins, or anything that he didn't think was appropriate for what you were doing at the time, he would let you know. And if you want to be better, this is what you need, right? You can't kid yourself and say, hey.
Yes. It is very shocking how much insight he has. So I took it like I have to learn from him. Like I have to be open to learn from him. And the fact that he's rather unpredictable. He's predictably unpredictable. You know he's going to throw things at you, but you don't really have the scope to know how that's going to happen. So I remember one of my evaluations, I was feeling really prepared. And then I showed up and he said, I want you to do a valve drill in back mount. And I was like, that's awesome, because I got this. And then he said, with no fins on. And my heart just sank because I had not practiced that. Like I had not. I went back to my car and I just remember I had this thought, I know how to do it. And it never crossed my mind that in an evaluation, he's going to ask me to do that. So I'm going to walk down those stairs like someone who can demonstrate a valve drill with no fins on. And I'm going to get in the water like someone who knows how to do a valve drill with no fins on. And then I'm going to descend and I'm going to do a valve drill with no fins on. And I was so clear in my mind, I'm not even letting the thought that I don't know how to do this, even get close to me at this moment. And I was literally like, fake it till you make it. And I went down and I did it. And when I was doing it, I was looking at him like, holy shit, I'm doing it. And I know it's not perfect, but I'm not here to say that I don't know how to do it. And through the training, there has been so many different stages and he can read people very well. So I think that I understood very early that there's no faking, like there's no trying to make it look like you do, but there's a lot of times where you are unsure if you will be able to perform it. And I think the performance part for me is really hard because I have massive problem when there's someone of authority in front of me. And my performance is way worse when he is there. When he's not there, I'm like, I know I'm doing much better, but why can I not do it when he's there? And I just know it now. So it's also a part of the growth, like I know that there's going to be a certain degree of things that because my mind is playing on me or because I have the pressure or because I want to do it great. Like I don't want to do just a pass. I want to do it really good. It has taken me a really long time to be able to do it because that is the process, and understanding the process is part of the success. If you get obsessed with the skills themselves, then you're focused on the small picture. If you look at the process and become part of the process and you are willing to stumble and get up again and stumble, and then it just goes a bit more smooth. And I think in the latest part of my training, that has happened. Like I understood the process a little bit more than just be obsessed with the skills, like we all in our life, we all come to Patrick one time and say like, can you give me the list of skills you want me to do? And he will say, there's no list of skills. You're either an instructor or you're not. There's no show, and that's very hard to understand. But going back to your question, so what has happened? So the first 6 months I did side mount and back mount. And then it took me another 6 months to do back mount again because I failed the first time. It's really important for me to talk about failure because there is a lot of failure in my life. And I want to make sure that people know that I was not born talented. I was not born an instructor. I was not born a really good buoyancy, you know, like none of us were, but we learned it and we practice every single day. And so taking failure from my mentor is something very difficult to do. Like, even if I say I don't want to impress Patrick or Kim or Jake, I, of course, want to do a good job, because my job is also the reflection of their job on me. So I should perform in a certain way. So when I fail, I also feel like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to. In failure, you actually get to do it again and you get to do it better. If you hadn't failed, you wouldn't know as much about yourself. And that's the tricky part. Like, if you want to know more about yourself, you really do have to fail sometimes. So that happened with back mount. Then I passed it. The second time I did it, it lasted literally 45 minutes. So, you know, sometimes it's like very fast. Sometimes it's very long and you don't know for days if you did it, if you didn't, if whatever. So yeah, the process is really not like very standardized. And then after that is Cavern. So Cavern took me from, I think it took me like a year. And Cavern was really tough, because Cavern is the first time you're going to be in the overhead with someone who does not know how to be in the overhead. So the realization that I am now going with people in these places, and the realization that my mistakes or my lack of awareness can actually kill me and my students, it was something that was affecting me psychologically. And I say affecting me, it's not like I had problems in the water, but I was thinking about it a lot. And it became something that I was very aware of. I could almost see myself from the outside with my students in the overhead. And so there was this almost like a mutation, like I just became someone else. When I learned to teach in the overhead, I became someone else. And it was very nice. I remember also being terrified sometimes when I was assisting courses and just realized, like, right now I am in the cave with someone. I have no idea what they're about to do. Then you turn around, it's like, I'm super close to the exit. I mean, you start feeling again like you've gone super far. That feeling you get when you're a student and you're doing full cave and you just went for like 3 minutes. And then you feel like we have to turn the dive, and you turn around and you see the entrance and you're like, oh, I felt like I had swum for 3 hours into the cave. My students tell me this. It felt like we've been going on forever. And it was like literally 2 minutes. I'm like, what's your connection time? 28 minutes. And your turn time, 30 minutes. So we swam for 2 minutes. And they're like, wow, really? So I had that as an instructor as well. I didn't have the opportunity of assisting or teaching myself as much as I would have liked it. Sometimes the agenda doesn't work. Sometimes the courses fell apart. The students don't complete the course, or they get an ear infection, or there was a student of a course that I was supposed to assist, and he decided to not continue, like to not start, basically. So then, of course, we cut, and there's all these life events that go on when we are teaching. So if I plan 10 assists, maybe there will be 5. Yeah. So I'm trying to assist all the time, knowing that less of them are going to happen. And then it was really tough. It was tough to have students that also have challenges, because it would be so easy that I teach someone and they do and learn everything I teach them. But of course, you are going to get a real student, which is my preference. I just love to have my evaluations with a real student, because then you will see me teaching. You won't see me performing, Yeah, it is something transformative, because you are also changing other people's lives. And with intro, this is like my new high. That people hug me and say, like, I never thought I could do this. And, you've given me this gift of diving caves, and to see them succeeding or struggling and learning, like it's all the human journey that goes on both sides is just incredible. So like I've always said, diving technical is, of course, the skills and the equipment, and everything seems super like metal and plastic and procedure, but the journey inside, this is what is truly why I'm here. Yeah, I can talk a lot.
Well, lucky for us, this is a podcast, so it's an essential part of the process. So thank you. Well, let's move on, because there was an amazing story, and I'm really pleased to hear, or it was really interesting to hear how it's changed you personally, and how I think what I can hear is a lot of personal development and personal growth as you've gone along this journey. You mentioned the word failure a lot too, which a lot of people associate failure with something negative. And of course, it's a negative experience at the time, but the realization that the path to success is made up or built on a foundation of failure, and that the only way to get it right is to get it wrong many, many times, and to learn each time and try and improve is really important.
Yes, and it is important for me to share that with people, because you don't come on the first day knowing how to do it. This is why you come to learn. Mm-hmm. It's like yoga, people say, I don't go to yoga because I'm not flexible, but you should go so you become flexible. So it's the same. I was a yoga teacher, so that's why I have that reference. And I think about it every time. It's like, oh, I don't have good buoyancy, so I can't do cave diving. It was maybe you should come and learn cave diving so that we can square the buoyancy. And then, those are fundamental and basic skills that you don't come with. And luckily for us, otherwise we wouldn't have a job as an instructor as well.
Yeah.
But it is true that the good amount of failure is a really good ingredient for anybody willing to get better. If you don't have a benchmark of where things break or where things go wrong, or what's your threshold of what you can stand in terms of stress, in terms, I try to teach this to my students. Please pay attention to your own learning curve. I have to learn their learning curve so that I can adapt my style of teaching or the rhythm of the class. But I tell them, please realize in yourself how this has been playing for you. Because the next time you have to take a tech diving course, or any course for that matter, you can use this to learn faster and to hone the skills in a more solid way. The learning curve is very different from one person to the other. And sometimes you have a couple or two friends who came to do the same course, and they're really not learning at the same pace. And, there's like a difference in ability or whatever. And I stress a lot, like, you guys look at your own process, how you learn, what is easy for you. A lot of people think they know how they learn. They're like, no, I don't need to write things down, I just need to listen. And then 5 days in, we still don't get it because they don't want to write it down. Then I'm like, okay, guys, you're sitting down now and you're going to write it down. No, but just write it down, please. And then you read it later tonight, and tomorrow we meet again.
Exactly.
Then things change. Yeah. So it's like the learning process is really interesting to look at.
Sure. So you mentioned earlier about you spend every waking hour almost either thinking about cave diving or cave diving yourself. And I know at ProTech you're encouraged to engage fully in cave diving in your time off, whether it be exploration or whatever else. What do you do in your time off in terms of cave diving?
So when I became a diving instructor, very quickly I realized that I did not only want to hang out in the water. I am at my best when I have a task to complete underwater. It's my highest and peak of concentration. It's when I don't have ADHD. It's when I have all of my senses are completely, in tune. And I love that. So I became really interested in scientific diving a long time ago. And I started volunteering in many different projects. And some of the times I also would apply for research grants or, different things that I just love to stay busy. When I started diving caves, then my fascination for science and underwater science, it just grew. Now, the problem, let's call it, is that time is a little bit reduced right now because of the training. So in let's say maybe 2 years before today, I was involved in a lot of activities that had to do with either survey or collecting data, or I did also my own project so I could collect data whenever I wanted, because like that, I don't have to volunteer for someone else. I can just go and collect my own data.
Yes.
So that is one thing that I try to always allocate time to. But we have the high season over here and then the low season. So low season is very low, high season is very high. So months go by, and truly I think I've done really well this year in making sure that I have a day off where I don't dive, where I eat properly, where I sleep a lot, where I can, recharge.
Yeah.
But having said that, I also love to produce videos and to be on the Sidewinder and to go exploring. So although I don't find many of the things I would like to find, but I have been doing some resurvey projects with some friends and trying to organize participating in explorations. So sometimes in my life, it's not like I have one day off a week where I plan to go and do something. It's more like clusters of time. Yeah. I was saying before, it's difficult to have a social life or family life. So I live now like 2 hours away from my parents. So they are sometimes, asking me to come see them. But yeah, it's a mix of jungle walking. It's a mix of survey. It's a mix of participating in like cave science projects, like the Science Week from Under the Jungle that I did with them last year. So those are like, little clusters of time where I'm not at work and I'm just cave diving for hours, looking at a flow meter. And
love it. Yeah, I think it is a thing when you dive a lot or you've dived for a long period of time. Like I've been diving for a long time. I think this year it might be 42 years or something like that. It's a sign of age, but it's also a sign that I have been diving for a long time. And I love the idea of creating little missions for myself. And I don't get to cave dive as much as I'd like to, but I do have a favourite wreck, as most people know, the Canterbury wreck, which I know incredibly well, having surfed on it and being the chief engineer of that ship, written books on it. But every time I go there, I create a little mission. And sometimes that mission is actually guiding people through the wreck. I love to do that. So provided they're at the right level and have the right amount of training, then, I'll guide them through the ship. And that's a huge amount of fun. And I did that on my last trip. But I'll also make up little video projects where I'll try to capture video of a certain part of the ship.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool thing to be able to do that. It's a way of making something that you do a lot much more exciting, if you know what I mean.
I mean, and this is contradictory, but I'm not very good at being very spontaneous with the plans, because I think that I'm also pretty tired after a period of time of working. So
sure.
I really like to have something that is coming up that I can wait for, and then I put my energy on that, and then I go and I dive for like 3, 4, 5 days, or maybe it's a trip, or maybe it's like something a bit bigger. But yeah, it sometimes also feels like, well, the caves are gonna be there all the time, so nothing happens if I don't go one day. But then it's like, yes, but when is the next time I can go, and then maybe I just really love to go. And I don't know, like I said, the luck of living in this region is just everything is available all the time. And sometimes you end up in a hole and it's not like a popular dive, or, I have a log from the first years of cave diving. And at the time I was diving a lot with Skanda, and most of those dives, like nobody goes there and nobody is probably hanging out in those spots. And places like Taj Mahal, I really didn't ever go until I started instructing, because I didn't have to. And so sometimes it's also about going to see places that I need for my work. So go to inspect a new site, or go to help a landowner do this or that, or team projects where several people are doing the resurvey of an area and we cannot dive at the same time. So one goes whenever they have a day off and the other one goes another time, and or then let's say my dream time off is when I can schedule something really cool with my friends, but it's very difficult to find the agenda at the same time. But last year we went to Acapulco with Said and Ariel, and we went to do a photogrammetry of a shipwreck, which was a little bit of going home for me, because this was the hometown of my father and my grandparents, and going there and diving there. And it was really, I think it was more emotional than I could show. It was really, really cool. And then also diving in the ocean, because I don't dive in the ocean very often anymore. It was really spooky, I have to say. Like, not very good visibility, being in the big blue ocean. And then, it was a little bit challenging in a very cool way. If I could accept all the invitations and if I could just plan fun dives, this would be every day of the year. But as I said, I enjoy my job and my daily life. So it's not a torture. I look forward to being at ProTech. And I always joke and I say that I have Stockholm syndrome, because on my day off, I go to the shop and I hang out there. And sometimes we buy lunch and we have lunch together. And it's like, what are you doing here? It's like, well, I had to come by. I have some errands to run and whatever. So it's very much being around the shop all the time.
Yeah, it is a fun thing, isn't it? I had the same go so technical where I would go in on my days off almost always. Sometimes it would be to see who's there and maybe I'd join a dive, and other times it's just to hang out with the people because they're so cool.
Yes. And it's like family.
Exactly. So let me carry on. I want to tell you about something that I'm excited about here. The dive operation that I'm working with here, Global Dive, I contract to them and teach Sidemount for their shop. And we've got a cave diving group, and we've been working for years now, dating back to before the pandemic, traveling to Australia to diligently work through the cave training there with the Cave Diving Association of Australia. Now, after, I think it was 2019, the first trip, we've got our first group of advanced cave divers are going to do their training, or going to do the advanced cave course in April. And I'm pretty sure they'll all pass. They're all awesome divers. So I'm pretty sure we'll get 3 or 4 of them coming through as advanced cave divers, which is the equivalent of full cave TDI. They'll be able to dive Tank Cave for the first time and a few of the other advanced areas, such as at the Pines Cave as well. But all that fun aside, because it is going to be awesome, we've always planned, once we get this group of TDI full cave, to come to Mexico. And so we've been talking about it and talking about it. And so it is cool. And to come from this part of the world, I mean, people know where New Zealand is, I hope. But it's a long way, right? It's a big trip for us. And
yeah, it's like a trip of a lifetime, right? That is super fun.
Well, yeah, hopefully we'll do it many times. And what I want to ask as I present this group to you.
I was going to say, it's not something you do spontaneously.
No, not at all. Not at all. It needs planning. And let's remember as well, with this shop, they run trips to Truck Lagoon. They run trips to... It's a busy shop running trips all around the world every year. And so we have to schedule this alongside the other big trips, because if you're going to go to Truck, it's a little bit difficult to go to Mexico in the same year, for instance. But one thing that we'll face as we come, having these guys built their experience in Australia and we come to Mexico, is the caves of Mexico are different to the Australian caves for sure. There'll be some things that are the same, of course. But let's talk for a little bit about some of the things that we need to consider in coming to Mexico to dive caves there, having trained in Australia.
Well, I guess one thing is that we always recommend that people get introduced to Mexican cave, because we have very complex systems that are also very fragile. I haven't dove in Australia yet, but I think that one thing that surprises a lot of divers is how shallow Mexican caves can be. Mm-hmm. And you know that handling buoyancy at depth is easier than handling buoyancy changes in the shallow water. So when you have shallow cave, very decorated, very fragile, very silty, this is sometimes something that kind of surprises people. So I'm trying to imagine, like, what is the image of Mexican caves that Australians have? Because it's still like very mediatic, right? Like there's a lot of videos and there's a lot of information around and people coming, like it has truly become the mecca of cave diving. But we do recommend that people have a guide, at least for the first days, so that you can get the workarounds and the logistics and, how do you just rock up at a site and get a key? Like all of this is sometimes easier if you have someone who will facilitate that. And then the other thing is like, for us, basic skills are truly just the holy grail of cave diving. Mm-hmm. And for us, it's more important to conduct dives that are like quality dives than how far you went or how deep you went. So I think that it's a good mentality to come and share and learn the Mexican cave. Is like the cave is about to teach you a lot about yourself. The little challenges that you had in another cave are not going to seem so big in those caves. But when you come to Mexico, it's like they're just magnified. So I say when people want to come, first of all, don't eat the full cake on the first day. Like you don't have to go to the most difficult side on the first day. And most people feel like, yeah, but I dive cave all the time. Yeah, but my trainer was this or that. Yes, but the environment is so different. So take it easy and go to a training site and kind of get into this culture of squaring yourself up and very important. And this is something that we face all the time. And especially because you said this is a trip around the world, right? People come after 25 hours trip, no sleep, dehydrated from long flights. And they arrive at midnight and they want to dive at 8 a.m. the next day. And they wreck themselves. And it just does not work. It's like allow time for both adjusting to time difference, to food difference, and to the heat and all of this. I sound like a mom, right? It's like, have you slept? Have you eaten? Have you drank your water? And then go from less to more. Mm-hmm. If you go straight to the blue abyss, yes, your mind will be blown. And then what? Then you've seen it, right? And then are you going to be one of those divers like, well, there's not enough stalactites? Well, you know what? Go to a big tunnel, wide cave, enjoy a simple helicline where you're not going to break anything. Mm-hmm. Get yourself squared, get yourself properly weighted, and then start going into more complex places so that you are growing with the level of cave that you're diving. So then when you go to this massive, famous dive site that is difficult to access, and then you're going to be so comfortable and so tuned in that you're going to enjoy it more. It's not because we don't want to show the cave. It's because we want people to be where they need to be when they go to those places. Because of what we talked before, it's so easy right now to get anybody to take you anywhere. You just have to pay. Like there's a price for everything. Yeah. Oh, but I only have one day. Then don't dive like that. You only have one day and you want to go to the most, not impressive, but how do you say it? Like the top of the rock on only one day. We don't do that. Mm-hmm. And there's divers is like, yeah, so on my first day, how many weights do you think I need? I'm like, well, go to car wash and do a weight check. No, I don't have time for that. I've never worn these undergarments and I've never worn these fins with my rebreather. But on my first day, I'm going to a photo shoot to like pet cemetery and with the people I don't know. And I'm like, what? This is not what we do in Mexico. In Mexico, you have to grow with the cave. And I hope that people take it the right way. This is not us trying to, it's not that we don't want to share it, but we want to preserve it. And if people are not tuned in, they will have problems doing those dives. And the problems, of course, we want safety. So, people have to be safe when they're doing the dive. But if you break something, the stalactite heaven is just getting piled on with these amazing formations that were knocked off by someone who did not do their process. So, like you were saying, what do I advise? Yes. I advise that people book days off and days to adjust from the trip so that then you can start on the right foot. And definitely come, hang out at the dive center, meet other divers, meet the community. This is an essential part of Mexican cave diving. People are there waiting for dive buddies. Groups come, then they split, they meet others, they share experiences. And this is something that is as antisocial as cave divers can be. This is something really enjoyable to find people sharing about their cave dives during the day, and they get a beer in the evening and talk about the plans for the next day. This is super cool. It happens both on season and off season, and it's just part of our culture that people will try to connect, right? And hang out and then give each other's advice as well. And, you know, people end up going across the globe to go to Australia and dive there because they met someone here who was at the dive shop getting coffee in the morning. And so that is also priceless in human connection.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I can't wait, and I'll keep you guys posted on how we go setting that up. I actually had a bit of a chat to both Patrick and Kim about that earlier. So my thinking is that we turn up, and you know how you need that kind of rest day you talked about. We could probably run a workshop on, especially something like navigation.
Yes.
And kind of planning the first day, which would be the next day, you know, as you say, at Car Wash or work Taj Mahal, wherever.
Yeah.
And somewhere where, you know, we can have a great dive and then start to build it up from there. And there is a variety of experience there. I've been cave diving for a lot longer than these guys, but it'll be interesting to be able to see how that group progresses. And I'm super excited about it. Perhaps we can finish off on this. You mentioned some of the pinnacle dives that you would go to towards the end of a trip. If you could only dive 2 caves tomorrow, which ones would you dive? And where would you go in those caves?
2. I would choose to dive a cave that I haven't dived yet.
Okay.
That would be my last wish, that I would get to dive a cave for the first time that I've never been. It's very difficult for me to choose one favorite place because every time I go somewhere, I'm just like, I should come back here. How come I'm not here every week?
This is my new favorite.
But then I go somewhere else. Yeah. And you know what? I really like looking at fossils. I think that in general, because of how I was educated and how I grew up, I just love observing things in nature. And when I'm in a cave, I'm very immersed in what things are around me. So when it happens that I'm on my own, or when it happens that I'm not guiding someone, I have more time to stop and look at the smaller things and look at, you know, there's animals in the caves and sometimes there's trails of like small crustaceans or whatever. And I just love to sit there and look at it. And I love to look at the rocks. And sometimes I see things that are really not important to anybody else. And I'm good with that. You know, I'm like, I saw a shrimp and it had eggs. It was carrying eggs. Like, how cool is that? You know, nobody else cares, but that's just perfectly fine. Or there have been times where I've been looking at some of the formations and I cannot figure out how these were formed. Awesome. And then one day it clicks and I'm like, of course, there was water and then it bubbled and the bubbles created holes. And then the water dried and the sediment on top solidified. So now there's like a grid with round holes and it's like a lace. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, good. I can tick this box off. Every time I see this, I now know how it was formed. Or there's this really cool one that I like to show people. It's a stalagmite, but the top is broken and it's hanging from the side, but it's rock. So how could it break and hang from the side? It's like a trivia. Then I get out of the cave. I'm like, did you look at that? Yeah. How did that happen? And people are like, maybe a tree was holding, you know, like all these hypotheses. It's like, well, I cannot prove it was this way, but that's my theory. And it's pretty fun.
Maybe an ancient Mayan tripped over it.
Yes, exactly. And then they tried to put it back. Yeah.
Well, Tamara, look, it's been amazing. It's been so cool to catch up with you and learn more about you personally and about your diving and your experiences at ProTech.
Thank you.
And also to hear some of the challenges and how you've overcome them is great as well. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And I do look forward to letting you guys know when we might be able to run a trip over because I'm super excited about that.
Yes. Well, I will keep you posted on more adventures. And I think that this won't be the last time that we talk. So I'm looking forward to sharing more projects and more news with you. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope so. And anyone who wants to follow you on Instagram or Facebook, it's Cenote Girl, is that correct?
Cenote_girl, Cenote Girl. Or you can also find me, Tamara Adame, my real name.
Well, amazing. Thanks so much. And thank you again for sharing with us, and we'll catch you soon.
All right. See you then. Bye.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did making it. It was phenomenal to catch up with Tamara and talk about her journey and her path to becoming a cave instructor. Thanks so much to X-Deep, and thank you to the patrons of Speaking Sidemount for supporting this show. It's no understatement to say that the show would not be here without their support, and it's sincerely appreciated. We'll catch you in the next episode. You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast and would like to support the show, then why not become a patron of Speaking Sidemount? For as little as $5 per month, you can become a part of the Speaking Sidemount team, get exclusive early access to all of the episodes, and help us to deliver the very best Sidemount, cave, and technical dive content available. Just go to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount for all of the details. The address is also on our Facebook page, listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.